Welcome to How to Deal When the Shit Gets Real podcast. I'm Rietta, and today I'm here with Yuki. So, Yuki, how do you deal when the shit gets real? Or just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow, that was a fantastic question, actually. When something gets so real, I actually tap into my spiritual dimension.
I like that. Elaborate on that.
Yeah, I want to talk a lot about that because when you say that shit gets real, I think you're talking about some challenges or adversity or problem in this physical world. So a lot of the things that I do is helping people begin owning and living a spiritual aspect and the perspective of life, because we are all spiritual beings. And I don't know, how many of your audience resonate with that, but I'm not, shy away from expressing where I come from. And when we understand that we're a spiritual being, every single adversity, challenges, problems becomes a way in which we can dive deeper into who we are. I can talk forever about that. That can be just one good topic, to be honest, because many people, that's where people get stuck, right? People have desire, want to live a great life. People are seeking happiness, love, peace is a huge one today, peace of mind and freedom. And, there is a part of the life that is very positive and people are appreciative, but then when things don't go well, I think most people get affected by that energy of negativity. We call that contrast. So there's a contrast in life, and it's very interesting. Are you okay with me just kind of using my language a little bit and explaining
Please.
So in this sort of physical realm, we call this, the spiritual realm is the realm of the absolute, and the physical realm is the realm of the relative. So realm of the relative means that something else exists in relative to something else. So left exists only because the concept of right exists, right? Small exists because there's something bigger. So let's say if, I don't know, is it 8 billion people or 9 billion people in the world, right?
Something like that.
Right. See, if every single person in the world has exactly the same height, there's no taller person or shorter person, right? So because that relativity exists as a norm and we don't really pay attention to it, just like we don't pay attention to gravity that exists all the time, we think that it's normal. But then this physical life experience consists of relativity, which means that, okay, darkness exists in order to appreciate and experience the light. Unhappiness exists, sadness exists in order to appreciate and experience happiness. Because if I know that every single person wants happiness, happy life, who doesn't want that, right? But the truth is that you can only and truly experience what happiness is by knowing what unhappiness is, the opposite is. So if you have never experienced the opposite, you actually couldn't truly experience what happiness is, what love is, what freedom is. So that's the spiritual lens, one of the spiritual lens, right? So then we start forming and wearing a lens that is different when a problem arises, because the problem is not a bad thing. It's a way in which it trains us to see the opposite, and you deal with this a little bit differently.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us, though, get caught up in reacting to the negative, right?
Yeah.
What advice would you have to people to kind of step back and maybe try not to react to that negative?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that I actually was going over in one of the coaching group that I had. So something that we really want to keep in mind is to understand the distinction between the outside event and the inside experience. So people assume that this is happening in the outside world, therefore I'm thinking and feeling this way. So the reaction to the external circumstance. Yeah. But for instance, if I ask anybody, right, let's say if somebody's feeling stressed or overwhelmed or frustrated, which is a common reaction that many people in the world experience. And then the natural inclination and tendency is that those people who are reacting 100% of the time is focusing on that outside circumstance and think and feel that this is making me feel this way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A good example is, okay, let's put Dalai Lama in there, right? In that context, do you think that Dalai Lama would react the same way? And then, right, if it's not, or Mother Teresa, or I don't know, whoever monk, right? So it's not that the circumstance that makes us react, but how we perceive it. And perception is not dictated by the circumstance, but by our own belief and the values and the model of the world that we're living. So it's important to understand that every single reaction, thought patterns that we have comes from within, which is our belief system that shapes our perception. So then, but here's the thing though, let's say if I explain this to the audience and people understand that, that doesn't mean that they're going to be executing that next time when they react. Because one, reaction is habitual. Two, we're so conditioned to focus on the outside, the five senses, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is so that the energetic arrow is pointing outside, and our internal survival ego is feeling that this is making me feel this way. You, the outside, need to change in order for me to feel differently. That's what the ego is saying, right? But if that reaction is actually not coming from the outside and it's coming from the inside, because every single emotion that we express, we say express means to go out. It goes out only because it's inside, right? So the seed of the emotion and the reaction lives in the inside. So if you're focusing on the outside and try to change the inside, it never works because that's not where it's stemming that emotion from. So the practice that we want to cultivate is to actually shut off that circumstance and situation that is happening in the outside. And in practice, this is, the ego doesn't like this. The ego wants to blame the outside. So the ego doesn't even notice that the arrow is pointing outside. But once you shut off, we want to make a little effort of turning the arrow towards you,
Mm-hmm.
and then ask, what's about me that is making me feel this way? And then begin asking those questions, and the layers start peeling off and start being able to identify the root of it.
And that's not easy to do.
That's not easy to do. So if I give just one practice, is to be able to observe and notice your reaction. Because if you're not able to notice and observe your own reaction, you're inside of that reaction. And if you're inside of that reaction, which is the emotion, you're not in control, but the emotion is controlling you. So you want to step outside of that emotional reaction to be able to notice. That's the very first step for any change and shift and transformation.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are people out there listening that are going, I can't do that. Are you nuts? I can't do that.
Yeah. You know, then if somebody wants a practical tool, I would suggest to close the eyes, because then that's the first way to not to let the outside impact. Then what's going to happen is that if you close your eyes and not see the outside, you start imagining that person or that situation in your mind. Because still the ego think that this is making me feel this way. So I need to take care of this one to be able to feel differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes more around the inside. So the first step is to really know that it's not the outside that's making us feel anything, but it's the inside, and to be able to shift our attention to that thing that's actually causing it.
Our ego is so pushy, man.
Yeah, our ego thrive surviving. So
Yeah.
the more you feel negative emotion, the more you can blame something, the more then the ego feels powerful.
I know you kind of touched on this already, but is there a way to kind of quiet the ego?
Yeah. I think I don't know how far I want to speak, because sometimes I need to, take people little by little.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't mind me talking about, what does it actually really mean to live from the spiritual perspective instead of talking about it, right?
Yeah.
So the embodiment of what does it take and what does it mean? How does that look? How does the actual experience is to begin living from that spiritual perspective? So, we have the body that we move, we have the mind that thinks and feels and emotes. So those are the dimension of the 3D physical world and the psycho-emotional plane. The spiritual plane, just for the sake of simplicity, I often use 3D physical world, fourth dimension psycho-emotion, and fifth dimension spiritual plane, just for the sake of simplicity, right? And the experience is in the 3D and the 4D, right? So you have the five senses: see, hear, smell, taste, touch. And you have the thoughts and feelings and belief that we entertain and play internally that shapes our experience. Yeah, that's simple, right? That's simple, good explanation, right?
Yeah.
Now, those dimensions are not the 5D, the spiritual dimension. So let's say if you remove that, and if you remove your thoughts and feelings and even belief, what's left? And what's left is you, right? And what's left is you. You can call that awareness, you can call that soul, you can call that the observer, right? So you're not your body, you're not the mind. We're a spiritual being living in the physical body and having a physical experience. So what does that mean? Means that, do you know who Eckhart Tolle is? Who wrote Power?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I wasn't sure if your audience familiar with, that type of author.
Maybe not everybody, but I've definitely read Eckhart.
Right. So he uses the term presence. So let's say if we, for a moment, quiet our talk and then quiet our inner chatter, then there's a silence, right? That silence feels like nothing for the mind, because being quiet has no sound, so it feels like empty, right? But for the spiritual dimension, the silence is an experience of fullness. It's filled with silence, right? So that's the presence. And we all have this, right? We all have this ability to feel and sense somebody's presence, somebody's warmth, somebody's energy, somebody's sort of underlying intention. Those intuitive stuff is in the dimension of the presence, right? But it's sort of hidden underneath of the noise and the louder volumes in life. So we don't pay attention to too much. But that is the spiritual plane. So, I mean, I'm explaining all of these, answering your simple question, and I actually don't remember exactly what the question was, but I think the answer is the more people practice being in silence and to feel comfortable with it, the more you can live from that place. Most people feel uncomfortable with the silence, right? Because they feel like they
Yeah.
need to fill the gap, right? But there's an enjoyment in it. Once you start, stepping into that side, there's an enjoyment in it's like a hot tub. I call it hot tub for the mind. Like you feel like you wanna, when you meditate, you feel like you wanna be there longer because it feels good. It feels connected. It feels home. And those feelings are a little bit difficult to explain in words because language is in the fourth dimension. But the essence of who we are is something underneath that's more subtle. So that's the presence.
No, I think that answers the question because it was about quieting the ego, and essentially,
Right.
finding quiet would be quieting the ego.
Yeah. Because if you align yourself with that silent place, you are not in that space and the dimension of the ego, right? The ego wants to sort of talk and do something and try.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
So does a lot of what you've talked about fall into the Satori mindset that you created?
Yeah. So Satori, I don't know if you and your audience are familiar with that term. Satori means awakening, enlightenment, realization in Japanese language. And everybody knows what mind is, and everybody knows what mindset is. The reason that what I do is like a school, right? Satori Mindset Institute, and then inside of that institute, we have this sort of process called Satori Mindset. And mindset is like a thermostat, right? Where the mind is set. So many people seek awakening realization to experience of fullness of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
But then I wanted to call it mindset because I wanna have that Satori place as a default mode. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not like just, once in a while you have this Kundalini experience or awakening experience and go to a different place. It's not that kind of Satori. But how can we make that as a way of being, living on a day-to-day life? When you're in traffic, you want to experience that. When you run into somebody who appears to be disrespectful or rude, you want to be in that default mindset. So just to come back to your initial question, to not to let that outside challenge or any shit gets in the way, but stay in that, above that, we call it frequency, different radio station to stay in that.
Ooh, I like calling it a radio station. As somebody who likes music, I've obviously heard calling it a frequency before, but I like calling it a radio station. That's nice.
Yeah. We're constantly playing different radio stations depending on the, identity that we perform.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you were a professional dancer previously.
Yeah, in Tokyo.
So what led you to be like, I'm done professional dancing. Let's do this mindset, Satori. Like, how did you totally pivot?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I was always, even before I started to dance, I was always into, I wouldn't say, I mean, at the early stage, I didn't have the terminology spirituality, but I kind of knew that there was an invisible realm. My parents are artists, so I was raised by two artists, and I lived in two different countries or even continents when I was little. So I grew up in a very different environment than majority of people, right? Changing different cultures from developing country to developed country. And my parents are very unusual where they never told me to do this or do that. They always told me to do whatever you want to do, which probably is a little unusual, especially in that Asian culture. And then
That was my first thought was Asian culture, at least from my understanding, is usually very strict. So yeah, that seems like
right?
a very different.
The opposite of it almost. Um,
Yeah.
and then I had this sort of understanding and curiosity towards life. And then when I was 16-ish, I did a lot of different sports that didn't kind of resonate with me too much. But when I discovered dance when I was 16, I knew that this was the vehicle that I wanted to explore. And my friend invited me to a place that, we can practice dance. And of course, he stopped dancing and I kept going, right? And about the same time, I run into a book. I can tell you the book is Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. And then that book opened my path because I felt like somebody was actually writing what I was feeling internally. It was this kind of spiritual thing was very personal for me and private for me. I wasn't really sharing with anybody because I didn't know if that was a good thing to do, explaining something that I wasn't able to explain correctly. And then I went to Neil Donald Walsh Conversation with God. So I went to university, university in Tokyo, but then my real school was a bookstore that I went afterwards. So I was excited about that transpersonal psychology, consciousness. And internally, I was sort of exploring that spiritual aspect. Externally, I was dancing. And that took me to Los Angeles in 2005, knowing that I wasn't going to continue dance. I went to Los Angeles for dance, but I internally knew that I was led to go there to explore ultimately what I'm doing right now. And then from movement to dance to dance was fantastic, but practically speaking, I had a bulging disc.
Oh.
Yeah, so I threw my back multiple times during audition.
Oh yeah, that's no good.
Yeah, and that told me, okay, this is the sign. And then I kind of transitioned into teaching movement like yoga, Pilates, and from their holistic health, and went to the mind and spirituality, personal development. And my journey is just connecting the dots of everything that I learned. And I was able to create a process and the framework and the map of how people can create a mindset, the default mode of realization. And yeah, but this is not an end product. I learn and expand my awareness every month, if not every week. And I do, events, I do weekly calls, and working with my clients is the best place that I feel the growth. Not when I take workshop or not when I read a book, but having all those information and implementing in an actual practical manner, I feel like that's giving me the most growth. Yeah.
I love that you kind of, like you said, you connected all the dots. You went from like taking care of your body to taking care of your mind to taking care of your spirit. I love that you went through like the full gamut.
Yeah. And to be honest though, like when you start exploring the body, it's a natural inclination to begin becoming curious about the mind. And then when you start exploring the mind, you will arrive to the spiritual dimension. But here's the interesting part of it. I started from the body, I went to the mind, I went to the spirit, and actually I came back to the mind because the body and the spirit just are, and the mind is like the bridge. So we don't need to try to do anything with that spirit because it's just is. And we want to take care of the mind so the body gets taken care of.
That
So
makes sense.
so I kind of return to the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. The mind is probably, I mean, not probably. The mind is the hardest part because we got some crazy stuff going on in there.
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
I do anyway.
yeah, yeah. That's where the actual shit resides, not the
Hmm.
outside.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
So what advice would you give to someone that maybe is feeling kind of struggling or lost or not having that mind-body connection? What advice would you give to them?
Mm. So 100% of the time when somebody is struggling in their life, their focus is in the outside or in the past present pattern is taking over. Yeah. And most people might not be aware that they're focusing on what they don't want instead of what they want. So let's say if somebody's struggling with anxiety, right, which is common, then most of the time, those who are struggling with anxiety are focusing on not wanting to have the anxiety, right? Then you're focusing
Mhm.
on what you don't want because that's what you're experiencing. And it's very important to focus on what is it that you desire and want and realize the attention that you're giving, right? So the opposite of anxiety could be peace. We want to be able to tune into how it feels to feel peaceful. So to answer your question, if somebody's struggling and wanting to obtain a mind-body connection, the first step is to sit in front of the piece of paper, pen and paper, and begin writing down what is it that you want, right? What is it that you want? And begin writing down without thinking too much, let the hands move, and then begin connecting with that desire and want as much as you can because your energy, as long as you're focusing on the lack, which is things that we don't want, it doesn't circulate, it doesn't create flow. Then your mind starts thinking in a pattern way that makes you feel like you're struggling and stuck, right? So to realize that 100% of the time when somebody's stuck with something or struggling, they're focusing on some sort of lack in their life, something that they don't have enough, right? So shifting your attention to what is it that you want instead, what you desire, what makes you feel expansive is the first step. And then from there, the way will be shown.
I love it. Nice and simple, not too complicated. People
Yeah,
can just write down what they want.
yeah.
Perfect.
Life
I know
is
you
simple. Yeah.
go ahead.
No, life is simple. People tend to make the mind tends to make life complicated.
That's true. We do make it more
Yeah,
complicated than it needs to be.
yeah.
Um, I know you recommended one book. Do you have any other like book or resource recommendations for us? I always love a good rec.
You know, I'm a huge fan of Don Miguel Ruiz's work. I don't know if you know him.
Oh, I don't know him.
Okay, so he wrote Four Agreements, which is probably the most known book. I like the fifth agreement that he wrote. He is from Mexico. He teaches the Toltec wisdom. But the four agreement is simple. Be impeccable with your words. That's number one, right? So to use words in a way that serves you. So the words that speak you outside or the words that you speak inside of your head. Agreement number two is don't make any assumption. Agreement number three is don't take anything personally. And agreement number four is always do your best. Agreement number five is this is interesting. Don't believe yourself and others
Oh,
and learn
oh.
to listen. So this might sound a little contradictory because people think that okay, we want to believe in ourselves, right? But that's not what he's saying. He said, don't believe yourself. So let's say if you have an inner critic or judgment, right, or any negative thoughts, don't believe in that what you're saying, because that comes from the belief that is a lie that's conditioned and you program when you are little. So learn to listen means to go outside of that thought so you can notice. And even he said, don't believe others. So what others says that might bother you, that's their shit of their
Mm-hmm.
mind. I don't use this language in every single podcast, just so you know. I'm just using because of this podcast, right? Right. So every single thing that people say or you say to yourself, to others, really learn to listen and notice where that was coming from. Yeah. It's very powerful. His work is very simple and then very profound. Yeah, don't be always.
Yeah, and I like that too because I know I've talked to people too that has talked about that a lot of those thoughts that you have anyway weren't your thoughts to begin with. They came from your mom, they came from your dad, they came from an ex-boyfriend. So it's not really even necessary that you're not listening to yourself, you're not listening to that old programming that got put into your brain by somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's fun. It's fun to work with this awareness.
Yeah. I have heard of that book. Now that you said the Four Agreements, that I have heard of. I didn't realize who the author was. So I will definitely have to read that one.
Yeah, yeah. So the fifth agreement, and there's a book called Voice of Knowledge, written by him. And he has different like a shaman type of books.
Ooh, okay. I
Yeah,
dig that. Okay.
all of these books are great.
Awesome. I love it. And then you also run a school group. So what does your school group offer and how can people become a part of it?
Yeah. Are you familiar with School?
I am.
Yeah,
Yes.
relatively new platform. So I have a school group called Soul Purpose Group. Anybody who is familiar with School, they can just go to the School platform and search Soul Purpose Group, and I think it's the only group. Um, Everything that I do is to help people align with what the soul is here to do. And I mean, people can also find School through my Instagram, Yuki Yoshii with the two eyes at the end is my full name. And I have a Soul Purpose Ascension workshop that I did recorded this year in January. It's stored in the group. So if anybody wants to learn how to ascend into the Soul Purpose, there's a step-by-step 5 days training that people can access in that group.
That sounds like a good resource because I was going to ask you what Soul Purpose is, but if it has a 5-day workshop, that's probably a better place.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I can give you a little rundown because people talk about, soul, people talk about purpose, and, there are a lot of people who feel like they want more in life or something feels missing. And when they talk about purpose, aligning with the soul purpose, people don't have a clear idea of what that is. Maybe I can share with you one of them, and
Yeah.
then so one of the I call it 5 pillars of soul purpose, and one of them is to truly tapping into your gift, right? So what that means is, and then that gift can evolve and change, just like it did for me, right? When I was dancing, I was a dancer, and then from there I started to teach movement. I was a movement practitioner. Now I coach people to wake people up. So that's just a natural progression. But then these are the things that I feel naturally called to. So to find that gift in the vehicle is one of the 5 pillars. So if you're living that, you feel aligned with the soul's purpose because now you're feeling meaningful with your day and the contribution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. That's it's a good way to start for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then all the other pillars, maybe people can join so they can find out what the rest of the pillar is.
Yeah, everybody go join Yuki's group. Um is it free? Is there a cost to it?
Yeah, it's free.
Oh, well then nobody has an excuse not to go join. Everybody go
Yeah,
join Yuki's group.
yeah. So once people join the school group, free access and soul purpose ascension is free. If they want a VAP access, which is very abundant person, because I think
Ooh,
everybody's important.
yeah.
I don't like the term VIP. VAP. They will get an access to the abundance training. We live in an abundant universe, but people don't live like that, right? A lot of people have this sort of interesting relationship with money, interesting relationship with feeling wealth and feeling full. They
Mm-hmm.
want that, but then subconsciously kind of push away. So if anybody has been in that sort of limbo, the abundant training is good. And then in order to access that, you need to claim that you are an abundant person. So you pay $47.
I think we can all manage that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny you're talking about abundance. I actually just started reading Think and Grow Rich a couple
Yeah.
days ago by Napoleon Hill. So,
Yeah. 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 Once you finish that book, I would love for you to read Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
But we'll get on a roll. We'll just keep reading Napoleon Hill.
Yeah. Napoleon Hill, Outwitting the Devil is a powerful book.
All right, that's next on the agenda.
Yeah.
Um, any final advice or just anything you want to leave my listeners with before we sign off for the evening?
Yeah. I think I have a lot of things that I want to say, but if I need to pick one thing, is to become clear with what is it that you want and what you would like to do in this lifetime, and to not to let the voice in the head, the opinion of others, and the existing circumstance to prevent you from living that. Because when you begin changing the inside, the outside change, right? So many people decide to do something because they don't feel they're ready because of the circumstance. But what they are not aware is that the existing circumstance is a manifestation of inside not being ready. So we want to tap into the desire and what is it that we want first, and begin nourishing and nurturing that energy, and the outside will be shifted and the way will be shown. We don't need to know the how. In the law of attraction manifestation we talk about, we don't need to know the how. Once you
Mm-hmm.
enter into the energetic, the how, the way will be shown. But it's important to be in that energy. So
Yeah,
to be clear with that desire would be my message.
yeah. Bashar talks about that too, to not worry about the how, to
Yeah,
just let it happen.
yeah.
But yeah, if you've got more, feel free to give us more. I'm not going to stop you from giving us good advice. So if you have more you want to say, please do.
Oh, let me share then one more thing.
Please.
So I think we want to practice observing our thoughts. That's where everything begins, right? So if anybody is interested in transformation, realization, right? I don't really teach modalities, right? Like I don't teach NLP, I don't teach hypnosis, but it's all those things are woven into how I work with people. But we want to utilize the nature of the mind to begin creating a lifestyle and the way of living that sets us free. And the very first step is to become aware of what kind of thoughts you're consuming, right? So the thoughts are something that we automatically generate, but we're consuming. When we experience, we're consuming. So if we're consuming negative thoughts or disempowering thinking or something that talks against yourself, which goes well with the agreement, be impeccable with the words, we are actually putting a mental nutrition that is toxic all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we shift that? First, by noticing, because if we don't notice that, we cannot change it.
Mm-hmm.
So to practice observing your thinking is the first thing that I want to recommend to everybody.
Yeah. A very dear friend of mine calls that mental diet.
Mm,
Just cleansing your mental diet, just like you would your regular diet of if you're watching trash TV, which don't get me wrong, it's okay every once in a while and we all get a kick out of it. But if that's all you're watching, your mental diet is not good.
yeah, exactly. And then also
Yeah.
when you start practicing talking to yourself, right? Like what's the benefit of reading great books? Because when you're reading it, your inner dialogue is aligned with that. So you're not giving space to think negatively. You're not giving space to the mind to enter anything that's not going to be serving you. So it's important to, because the mind wants to think just like the lungs wants to breathe. So we can meditate and be in silence for a moment, but then it's not realistic to just be there all the time and begin living life. We want to have the thoughts. Then we want to be able to choose the thoughts as nourishing, empowering, inspiring, so we can feed ourselves with all those mental, energetic nutrition. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. We get super caught up on what we're eating, but we don't always think about what we're absorbing for our mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, Yuki.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone. This is How to Deal When the Shit Gets Real, guys. I will see you all next episode.